everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I've got a great stream with a great guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind you that if you would like to support everything that we're doing on this show and everything that the Blaze is doing in general, then you can head over to blazetv.com/Auron and use the promo code Auron to receive $20 off your subscription. It lets me continue to deliver the content you're looking for, and you also get access to all kinds of behind-the-scene exclusives. You get to see all of your favorite hosts, and of course, we have access to all kinds of other important material like the publication Frontier Magazine, merchandise from the different hosts, including the Auron MacIntyre show. So again, if you want to head over and help out, you go to blazetv.com/Auron and use promo code Auron to get $20 off. All right. Well, the bombs have been dropping, or the tanks have been firing, I guess would be a slightly more accurate thing. But we've just heard on Friday that Russiagate has theoretically been blown wide open. Not that we didn't know that ultimately this was a hoax, but DNI Chief Tulsi Gabbard has said that she has definitive proof that the intel community cooked many of these different accusations in order to attack and derail Donald Trump's incoming presidency. Also, a stray tank round into a church in Gaza has a lot of people flying off the handle on both sides. Obviously, a horrible tragedy as 3 people were killed, but the showdown that has exploded online, especially across the Christian right, has been a very unfortunate and interesting result. So we're going to get into both of those topics. Joining me today to do so is everyone's favorite frog, the Prudentialist. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me on again, Auron. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, let me just go ahead and put up the press release that Tulsi Gabbard put out here recently so everyone can see the breakdown. Before we get too deep into that, though, obviously Russiagate, big hoax. We all knew this. This is not massive information. But we're starting to get this evidence here that is rolling out that you can document that there was no Russian collusion. The intelligence community said there was no Russian collusion, and then magically there was Russian collusion just in time to create a serious problem for Donald Trump. Again, I don't think either of us are going to be surprised at this, but do you think that the documentation itself is in any way a significant step towards perhaps receiving some kind of justice for what happened here?
No, I really hate to go off the bat and say it like that, but I think that a lot of us had understood that, at least for 2016 and really since then, it has been this long arcing shadow, or this scarlet letter rather than it's just been a scarlet red letter on the Trump administration that's been labeled by the press and the overall progressive intelligence community. Trump is a bull in the china shop when it comes to all things related to our government, whether it's changing foreign policy or changing even the general perspective on immigration and things like that. It's why I voted for him in 2016, was like, this is better than Hillary Clinton, and whatever he does is going to be really interesting for 4 years, better than the last, like, Obama's third term with Hillary Clinton. So to see all this play out, one, it's, I guess, refreshing to have another, I guess, right-wing or like Republican talking point validated on the long arc of history, that things were indeed cooped up and cooked up for this claim of collusion. But at the same time, it really crosses into this awkward territory, because you do have, I think what came out for some of the reports that came out in the Trump administration and even out of Obama appointees in the intelligence community, that what was spent on Facebook was maybe a few $100s at most for Facebook advertising. I distinctly remember that being shown around shortly after the Russiagate stuff began. But also at the same time, you have this Russia position that had been put out, and this is 2 years after a lot of American involvement inside what happened in Maidan in 2014. So it gets very complicated, because on one hand, you're right, this was used against a sitting president, or a duly elected president of the United States, who would then become the sitting one, and he would be labeled, and we had this whole media thing. Like, I know that we kind of look back on the first Trump administration sort of with this hazy memory, but you had the Mueller report, you had Rachel Maddow just like liturgically chanting about how Mueller's going to blow everything open. Like, she was like a Millerite. Like, all of a sudden this case would be blown open, the books would be revealed, and all of Trump, like, it was basically like the second, the second coming and the final judgment for Trump played out on MSNBC. So my concern, though, with all of this has been a lot of these sort of like MAGA media sphere, where there's been posts about how like the Shady Bunch, there was a Truth Social post about that from the president, talking about all of the intelligence community and Barack Obama. There had been sort of like AI deepfakes from MAGA fans that are associated explicitly with the brand about having like Obama arrested. And I share the same opinion that Matt Walsh had on Twitter. Like, he originally said, this might be unpopular, only for it to be the most universally
the take everyone had. Yeah.
Take everyone had was like, unless you're going to arrest Brennan and Trump and Comey and the rest of them, this doesn't mean much to me, because at the end of the day, it's sort of this American political tradition that even the left and the right kind of agree on, is that something will get declassified or revealed several years later, and they'll kind of just tease the public like, well, what are you going to do about it? And it's like, well, I can't do anything about it, but you're the director of national intelligence. You could work with the FBI or the DOJ or someone for some kind of indictment, because as people like Amanda Milius and others had done with that, Plot Against the President film, like, there was a lot of data, whether circumstantial or otherwise, that pointed out that they really wanted to do everything possible to kneecap Trump's first term on foreign policy and with domestic issues. And they did a great job at succeeding, because you can talk to older white progressives today and they'll still tell you that he's Putin's puppet, despite the fact that, the two men are on the world stage still fighting each other in Ukraine, and still, over the long history of the US and Russia, both pre-Soviet Union and post-Soviet Union, America, and by a greater extent the Anglosphere, and Russia have been long-standing geopolitical rivals in the Great Game. So it's very hard to parse through, because there is Russian influence. There are obvious actors involved at trying to disrupt American politics, but at the same time, what was proposed by the outgoing Obama administration does not hold up to snuff. But I don't know, and most likely it won't lead to any arrests or major change.
Yeah, it's obviously the chance of lock her up echo in your ears, right? This was a big part of the original Trump campaign. We knew that Hillary Clinton had committed crimes, that she was responsible at the very least for her email scandal and everything involved in that. And yet, nothing came of it. They threw around this language. Curtis Yarvin famously called it fishing in the Rubicon. You make these promises. You basically say, hey, if we get into power, we will punish our political enemies because they did something wrong. And that is a declaration of a breaking of kind of the informal truce, as you pointed out. There's this informal truce of no matter what happens, we just don't. We don't actually prosecute political enemies, even if they did do something wrong or illegal. And obviously Trump threatens this, but it doesn't follow up. And so when the left gets into power, they do exactly that. They do lock Trump up. They do seek to put him behind bars. They do seek to remove him from the political chessboard through, trumped up charges. That was their entire goal, because once you have introduced this weapon, the escalation is the only option, right? And that's why you don't fish in the Rubicon. That's why you don't play with this. If you're going to do it, do it. I'm for it, but you got to do it. You can't sit around and say, oh, well, we're going to take this action and do nothing. And so, unfortunately, this truly breeds a level of complacency in the population, because everyone just looks at this and says, look, these people never get in trouble. They never go to jail. And even if you say you're going to put them in jail, you don't, and then they put you in jail. So why would I expect anything? Like, great to have this level of disclosure. As you said, yet another right-wing conspiracy theory. And this is why I love the Nathan Kaufmanis's of the world. Only the experts can possibly be right. No, they're just literally wrong all the time. Your epistemology is fundamentally broken, because it requires a set of qualifications, credentials that simply are completely worthless at this point. I would trust a dog trainer over the average professional in any kind of soft science. And increasingly, sadly, in several hard sciences. And so you have this situation where, like, obviously there's smoke there because there's fire. But if you never take any action on this, if you don't do anything about it, then this gets really frustrating. Before we get too deep into the topic, let me just read what she had in this press release, because it's not that long and everyone's going to want to know exactly what got laid out here. Now, there is a accompanying set of documents here. They're heavily redacted, and obviously it would take us a long time to go through all of them. But if you would like to, the link is there. You can follow that and see the documents that she's referencing here. But it says, on Friday, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard reveals overwhelming evidence that demonstrates how, after President Trump won the 2016 election against Hillary Clinton, President Obama and his national security cabinet members manufactured and politicized intelligence to lay the groundwork for what was essentially a years-long coup against the president. In the months leading up to November 2016, the intelligence community consistently assessed Russia and said it is probably not trying to influence the election by using cyber means. In December 7th, 2016, after the election, talking points were prepared by DNI James Clapper, stating foreign adversaries did not use cyber attacks on the election infrastructure to alter the U.S. presidential election outcome. Then on December 9th, 2016, President Obama's White House started gathered top National Security Council principals for a meeting, including James Clapper, Brennan, Susan Rice, John Kerry, Loretta Lynch, Andrew McCabe, and others to discuss Russia. After that meeting, DNI Clapper's executive assistant sent an email to IC leaders tasking them with creating a new IC assessment per the president's request that details the tools Moscow used and actions to influence the 2016 election. It went on to say that ODNI will lead this effort with participation from CIA, FBI, NSA, and DHS. Obama officials leaked false statements to media outlets, including the Washington Post, claiming that Russia had attempted through cyber means to interfere in, if not actively influence, the outcome of the election. And on January 6, 2017, a new intelligence community assessment was released that directly contradicted the IC assessment that was made throughout the previous 6 months. So Tulsi Gabbard is basically laying out a chain of meetings and documents in which it appears that just a few days before, or a few months before, we got repeated reports that Russia not involved. Don't worry, they aren't influencing the election. There isn't significant interference. This isn't something we need to worry about. We ensure you the elections are safe and legitimate, and that we don't have foreign interference. And then we collect all of these principal actors inside the White House, and all of a sudden it turns out we need a new assessment specifically designed to meet the requests of President Obama at that time. And magically, lo and behold, it turns out that there was Russian interference, that all of a sudden we have evidence for it that didn't exist before, and Obama officials are leaking these statements. So again, the actual documents themselves are included, and they said they'll be dropping more here soon. But it does seem that there is a factual chain of custody here with different documentation showing the process that we went through. Again, nothing surprising here, but it is nice to have this, kind of a forensic breakdown of how this developed and how the narrative was shaped in real time. Again, any right winger on the internet probably would have told you this is happening, but it is nice to have the definitive smoking gun of how this was put together.
Yeah, and I think that, outlining a chain of evidence or a chain of custody for how things had broken down, things that were kind of publicly telegraphed, at least that we could know, or at least things that felt pretty circumstantial, like there's that famous, tarmac meeting with Loretta Lynch at the time and the Hillary Clinton campaign, and the people that were working with her closely, and Bill meeting with her as well. Like all these things that had taken place, it's good to have actual records or intelligence to prove that. I mean, I don't work with the Director of National Intelligence. I don't work with anyone in the administration. I'm very curious to know what records they do have, or what didn't get scrubbed, or what's been protected by some sort of State Secrets Act or whatever, anything like that. But I mean, it'll be good to outline it, because at least at the very least of it all, there will be some formalism in place to say the things that we had talked about now for about a decade have been confirmed by the obvious, evidence that has been released, however redacted or whatever it may be. Now, this act of transparency is good, and I think that maybe it moves some of the attention away from some of the other flubs that this administration might have had with transparency and releasing other media lists and things like that. But again, it comes to show that, you can post about arresting people and you can rile up your base into doing these things. But if you're not actually going to go out and make a case to say that the previous president of the United States effectively committed high treason against the American people, then, I mean, again, we have to be realistic. I know that the odds of that were low anyway, but at the same time, it's just, are we doing this to confirm our suspicions like we always do when we're in sort of this like media cycle of always wanting to prove that we've been right this whole time? Or are we going to be doing something greater? Because a lot of these people still have significant influence and sway in the intelligence community. I know that some of them have had their intelligence community and some of their secret clearances, revoked under this administration, which is a good thing. But it's not as if they still don't have connections or even human intelligence inside the existing intel community under this administration. And as we know from the first Trump administration, that we had the Joint Chiefs of Staffs, we had the intelligence community working behind the president's back all the time to ensure that he was somewhat contained or his efforts were curtailed. Hopefully that changes. I mean, I get it. We're 6 months into the administration to the date. So I think that it's important for us to look at all this and realize, okay, this is good, but what happens next? And I think that's always the question we should be asking when any kind of bombshell information is released.
Yeah, and that's really the key here. Again, we just got the disclosure from Jake Tapper that it's okay for us to now recognize that Joe Biden was never president. It was always the autopin. It was always a cabal of actors inside the White House or the wider government apparatus, and it was in no way a real presidency in the way that was intended by the Constitution. And yet nothing's going to happen there either, right? And this is. Look, sitting around and predicting, like civil unrest or something over this stuff is at this point kind of laughable. If you're not going to do it over COVID, if you're not going to do it over anything else, obviously it's probably not going to happen here. So the idea that there's a lot of ruin in a country, as is said, and you have a lot of people who will continue to watch. Basically, the deep state can just outright control the United States without any kind of real apology. It doesn't matter if it's Barack Obama completely derailing a elected presidency, or whether it's Joe Biden more or less being used as a puppet to initiate a coup and run the White House with a bunch of unnamed people who are in no way accountable to the people of the United States. I know it's really hard to lose any more faith in the U.S. government at this point, but is there any point at which there's a cost to the American government where this actually fails? I mean, how many times can we have it completely revealed that the game is rigged, that basically it's illegal for a Republican to govern the United States, and that the Democrats are more than willing to break the law on every level because they know they're just never going to jail. If you don't put someone in jail, they're going to keep breaking the law. That's how rule breaking works. I don't know. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills on this, but what do you think?
Well, I mean, that's the important question. It's just so what does this all lead to? I hate to make such a reference on the air, but I feel like it's that post-credit scene from Finding Nemo where all the other fish escape the dentist's office. They're in their bags and then they're just floating in the ocean. And one of the guy goes, well, now what? And it's just that's the question I ask all the time. It's just well, now what? Because a release like this is major to have actual evidence and a chain of evidence that says these are the things that took place that led to the outgoing administration doing everything possible within their means, either treasonous or otherwise, to set up the incoming president for failure when your guy did not win, i.e. Hillary Clinton. All of that just goes to show, okay, well, what is the cost of this? Because if not, this puts you and I think everyone's sort of in the sort of conservative or right-wing media ecosystem in this really weird place because we live in slightly a different reality than maybe what the administration lives in or even what the average Republican, MAGA supporting voter lives in because you and I are tuned in and online all the time. So now we're in this sort of cycle where is this more for the content and for people like you and I and for people at OAN and Fox and everywhere else to sort of talk about these things? Because now we have another talking point. Now we can keep ourselves focused on this issue while maybe other things in the administration go on that we may not like or our efforts are directed elsewhere. Because I already know that Barack Obama had done everything possible to sabotage Trump and continues to still do so with whatever political connections that he has. I also know that probably more importantly for me is that this Dignity Act that Representative Salazar from Florida is putting forth needs to be destroyed. Because anytime I hear someone say this is an amnesty, I know that it's amnesty. And I think that maybe more of our attention should be dragged towards that than something that you and I kind of already know is real and true, which is that Barack Obama and the intelligence community and everyone inside the greater bureaucracy that gets called the deep state did everything to sabotage Trump 1.0 for a president who did not have, I think, maybe the best clue of what it meant to govern the country or operate in the White House at that time.
Well, last thing before we move on, you've alluded to it a few times, and I think it's important because I had it scratching in the back of my head. The way that Trump responded to the Epstein stuff was particularly tone deaf, right? A lot of people came out and said, well, I think it's because he's like in the files or something. I don't think that's the case. Anything's possible, but I've never felt like that's probably the motivation there. The thing that was always in my head is like he kept comparing it to Russiagate and all these other things. And oh, it's just like the Democrats fake stuff. It's obviously not the same, but I kept thinking to myself, are they going to release something on that? Because he seems so obsessed with the Russiagate stuff again all of a sudden and calling that a hoax. And so, and I'm, to be clear, I'm not, I'm in no way justifying or covering for the Trump administration's terrible handling of the Epstein files and everything involved there. However, at the back of my mind, it was, I'm thinking the whole time, is this going to be the case? Do you think that the reason that Trump handled the Epstein stuff so badly is he knew that this stuff was coming down the pipe and he was thinking to himself, I want this to be the main, I want this to be the main story. I want this to be the main issue. This is how they attacked me when I was coming in. We finally got the evidence, so we're going to break this, and this is going to be a huge case. Do you think he was mainly concerned about the Epstein stuff, like taking over all of his revelations about the Obama administration and what they did? Or do you think this was purely reactive, just like, well, we've been working on this and things haven't been going so great otherwise, so it's time to kick this out?
Well, if there's one thing that we can learn from maybe the first Trump administration is that Trump has the ability to set the media agenda very well when things don't play his way. I mean, a misspelled tweet, I think that was meant to say coverage, Covfefe or whatever, that was on the news headlines and chyrons for like a week when he in the first administration. And because he was tweeting, he effectively would set the agenda that put the reporters in the reaction / oh, we're on the defensive because we're not the ones setting the headlines. I mean, Trump isn't on Twitter as often. I mean, yes, there's Truth Social and he can still post whatever he wants. But I think that it's safe to say, or at least based on my gut, that his past track record tells me that when things don't go his way in terms of the press, that we shift to another issue. And I mean, covering something that I think Trump is the kind of guy that definitely does hold a grudge against people. I mean, a lot of people like to say that it's the Seth Meyers, Barack Obama jokes from like 2013 that finally told Trump to go run for president just to say, screw you to Obama. However true that may be, like, we know that the media has a huge impact on the way that he acts and governs himself. And so I think that to some extent, yeah, this was probably like, we need to shift gears so that people know that we're still on board and we can throw a little bit of red meat to the base. And I mean, I think Trump's coalition in 2021 or 2025 is way different than it was in 2016 or 2017. So how much of people want to remember Russiagate or care about it is a whole other question. But I mean, it does reiterate things that you and I know, and that even our parents or our older relatives might know that have voted for Trump, that like Obama was bad. He did all these things to screw Trump over before he even got into the White House, and he is evil or whatever. Like those are things that we can all kind of basically agree on.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it's anything other than like, oh, we need to shift gears and try and change media coverage. And perhaps it was sort of set up, but thankfully, however, at least on our, like I said, on like the Twitter timeline or whatever, our attention rapidly shifts so fast that people have kind of stopped talking about Epstein and then made other characters online far more interesting, whether it is the Russiagate stuff or even the other topic that we have in mind for today.
Yeah, so let's move on there, because you're right. Unfortunately, the churn is real and it leaves everything behind it. And at this point, that's something that pretty much every political actor can count on, that holding the public's attention on a particular issue for any amount of time is going to be very difficult. And so if you can weather the initial storm, the public will move on to something else. And what may have single-handedly knocked really much more than the Russiagate stuff, which might have knocked Epstein out of the discussion here, is this news about Israel striking a church in Gaza. So this is a report from Axios. The Axios report here is claiming, now we know for sure 3 people were killed and 10 more injured in this attack last week. Apparently, it's a tank that was fired in the direction of this church. Now, according to the report, and remember, this is Axios, so we're not taking this as gospel here, but according to the report, basically Trump got outraged when he heard about the attack, called up Benjamin Netanyahu, wanted to know why there had been no apology issued, why there had been no acknowledgement of the attack on this church in Gaza, killing these 3 people. Once he did call, then Israel issued a apology, which, for those who don't know, is very odd. Israel pretty much never issues any kind of apology for the type of stuff it's doing in a war. Very much, definitely not their standard procedure here. But here's the text of what Israel put out. Israel deeply regrets the stray ammunition hit Gaza's Holy Family Church. Every innocent life lost is a tragedy. We share the grief of the families and faithful. We are grateful for Pope Leo for his words of comfort. Israel is investigating the incident and remains committed to protecting civilians and holy sites. Now, Cardinal Presbala, who is it? Yeah, Presbala, who's the Latin.
I'm not too sure. I don't know how to pronounce it. Forgive me.
Yeah, he's the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, but he said that the tank fired on the church. And he said he was not sure about this being an accident because it hit the church directly. So this isn't like a bomb that dropped from a plane, and then despite the title, sorry, I had to make the pun with the bombs. But this is not a bomb dropped from a plane that happened to drift a little too far. This is a fire from a tank, so it had to be aimed at some level. Now, it's not like tanks can't miss, so there is the possibility that this was not an intended fire target, but people on the ground, including the cardinal there, saying this might not be the case. So this is really interesting because first, a lot of ill will. First, I should say, just before we do anything else, this is terrible. The deaths of Christians is horrible. The Israeli government has apologized, but they absolutely should and should be held accountable for the killing of Christians in Gaza. Before we talk about any kind of political implication, understanding that these people being killed was horrific, and that should be the main focus of what's going on here. Now, that said, the political implications are pretty large. Israel has already lost a lot of, I think, public goodwill with what's going on. October 7th, it's always, it had a lot of, it had a casus belli to kind of involve itself in many different conflicts, including at this point Gaza and Iran and Syria, all simultaneously somehow, and all the other countries that it's currently fighting, Lebanon and such. However, the fact that has continued to wear down is pretty obvious, to the point where even Michael Knowles on the Daily Wire, after this happened, said Israel is losing me. He just said straight up, Israel is losing me in this war. If this is how it's going to conduct itself, I'm a Catholic. I can't stand by and be quiet about this. And there were a number of Catholics who were, pretty understandably enraged in this. Now, the very weird turn that this took was that Joel Berry of the Babylon Bee decided that even though Israel had already apologized and admitted that this was a mistake and said, we shouldn't have done this, all these things, Joel Berry, for some reason, decided to come out and start talking like this. Now, this is just he had a lot of tweets on this that he got really destroyed over, but he said, this won't be easy for people to hear, but there are only about 200 professed Catholics still living in Gaza, and they all support Hamas. True Christian faith still exists in Gaza, but it's all underground. Anyone allowed by Hamas to practice openly is allowed to do so only because they aid and support the terror regime. So Joel Berry comes out very directly and says, well, these Catholics had it coming, because no Christian would be allowed to operate inside of Palestine, like inside of Gaza. And so if you are openly Christian inside of Gaza, the only thing that can mean is that you are complicit with the Hamas. And so therefore it is okay if Israel shoots you, because really at the end of the day, you are on the side of Hamas, and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter that you're theoretically Joel Berry's fellow Christian. Israel is allowed to kill you, you kind of stop being a real Christian if Israel shoots at you, I guess, is kind of that Israel gets to decide whether or not you're a Christian by whether or not they're directing tank fire at you, which, I mean, he got rightly destroyed on this. It was really disgusting.
Yeah, and again, how much of this was accidental or intentional, I don't think you and I will ever get the full truth. I don't think there's going to be some sort of commission or report or an interview with tank crews that are going to give us an answer to that. I mean, from the photographs and everything like that, boy, it sure looks like a pot shot was taken at the cross at the top of the church. Could be wrong.
It really does.
It really does. And I mean, it's not as if Christians living in Israel or in that part of the world, in Palestine, has had a great time since it stopped being a majority Christian area, whether it comes from Islamic conquests or the creation of the state of Israel since 1948. Now, of course, I think that the state of Israel knows that it has to keep this very strange balance going on, especially in places like Jerusalem or in other holy sites to both Christian and Jewish and Muslim faiths around. I think that that is an incredibly politically tight rope that they have to walk on. And so this is on top of the fact, as you had mentioned earlier, where since October 7th, for a variety of reasons, a lot of it due to changing demographics of the United States, where the political opinion on Israel has changed, as well as the things that many people on the right would get canceled for. I mean, you had said this, I think, on Tom Woods' show, where like Russell Kirk had been canceled for making a comment on the relationship between the United States and Israel and the United States Congress. The same things that Pat Buchanan or Joe Sobran or Sam Francis, these sort of intellectual heavyweights of various stripes in the United States right, had been tried or at least attempted to see cancellation for them. And I know Joe Sobran and others had faced that kind of cancellation. And it really does just go to show that this is trying to peel back an uncomfortable history of over, of 2,000 years now of, Christianity being in Jerusalem and the surrounding parts of Judea and Palestine, because it's not as if we go from the book of Acts to today. It's not as if they've had the best time living in that region to begin with. And so now, given, the Israel public affairs debacle that they've been dealing with now for the last several, for the last 2 years almost now, it really raises the question of like, well, what's going to happen next? I mean, I was surprised to see Mike Huckabee, who I don't know his exact theological positions. I think he is some kind of Christian Zionist and dispensationalist. I could be wrong.
Definitely a dispensationalist, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And so like even with that, to see him visit and to even make the statement of threatening to publicly condemn and that any attack on a synagogue, a church, or a mosque is bad and that we shouldn't allow these things to happen. I was genuinely surprised to see him visit with the Latin churches as well as with the Orthodox, clergymen and leadership in the area. They're already as you mentioned, there's an incredibly small minority that already exists there. But I mean, I think Barry's take that like we're going to somehow put upon a curse of association because of his view of World War II in Catholicism. And, we're going to somehow punish people that have been, persecuted for their faith for centuries in this part of the world is beyond wild to me. And it goes to the same thing that we've seen written by, Camus when it comes to like things like the Great Replacement and the post-war order, that we have replaced Satan and we have replaced everything else with the specter of World War II and Adolf Hitler. And because of that association of whatever happened in the 1940s, that is the new ancestral curse that we all hold on to. There's no more original sin. It's just, what did your ancestors do during the 1930s and 40s? And for Joel Barry, that just means that we have to support Israel at all costs and denigrate anyone who may have opposition to what the Israeli government's doing or the persecution that they may endure, and just associate them with terrorism, or worse, associate them with fascism. Paul Gottfried's written about this before in his book, Anti-Fascism, A Course of Crusade, where that's sort of the post-war order that we have in the United States, that we always have to compare things to fascism. We used the term the axis of evil the same way we talk about the Axis powers in World War II when it came to the invasion of Iraq in 2003 from George W. Bush. David Frum wrote that, and David Frum is still on Twitter posting these things. Like, dude, you don't have the world's best track record on this issue either. And so, unfortunately, it's depressing because this loss of life, and if it's intentional, then this martyrdom of these Catholic Christians in the area has been turned into, unfortunately, a political tool for American conservative media, which of course is overwhelmingly Christian, to debate about theology and the issues there, and never about sort of this ongoing relationship between strange theological positions and the Christians United for Israel or anything like that, playing a role on how the United States engages with a country that has been, at least geographically, contains the borders of the majority of the faithful in the United States, and we don't seem to do anything about it. So it's really unfortunate all around. And anytime that someone tries to approach this, there's always either the accusation of anti-Semitism, of being a heretic or whatever, and it just gets ugly very quickly.
Yeah, as Tucker Carlson has pointed out multiple times, it seems like the point of American foreign policy is to kill Christians. Like no matter what we do, we end up hurting Christian minorities in the Middle East on a regular basis. And to frame some of what you're saying there, not only was Mike Huckabee incensed over this attack, but Mike Huckabee was also getting very aggressive with the Israeli government because apparently they have regularly refused visas to Christians coming in there under the suspicion that they might be missionaries, that they might be wanting to share the Christian faith rather than Israel. And of course, Israel doesn't want, people converting to Christianity. The Jewish state does not want its people to become Christian. So they actively reject people who want to come over and talk to people about their faith in Christ. This is something that people don't talk a lot about. A lot of the Christians, especially dispensationalists or Zionist Christians, do not want to talk about this fact that Israel has this understanding about the way they should maintain their religious ethno-state, but this is absolutely the way that they operate. And so Mike Huckabee, after watching everything we've done for Israel, watching these people now turn around and say, you can't come in because you're Christian and you might talk to people about Jesus Christ, and then shoot at a Catholic church. If you're Israel and you're losing Mike Huckabee, things aren't going well for you, right? Like that's a bad sign. Like when Mike Huckabee is looking at you and saying, I don't know, guys, like I'm starting to wonder that these people might not be our greatest ally if they're rejecting Christians to come in because they're worried that they might talk about Christ, and they're firing on churches, even if it's an accident. Like, not great. Like, they have to be forced to apologize. If that isn't even an accident, that's a pretty big deal. And the fact that Barry weighed into this the way he did was very destructive. And this is what really worried me, is a lot of Catholics, and I get this because, the Catholic, Protestant, and Orthodox divide has been there for a long time. Obviously, things, jokes get thrown around, but then also serious accusations get thrown around. A lot of people were like, well, Joe Barry just is an anti-Catholic bigot, which, hey, I'm not here to dispute that at this point. But Joe Barry, he doesn't think that Catholics are real Christians. And again, I can't speak for Joel Barry on this. What I can say is that while I understand that has, there's some bad blood there has been some brotherly chiding back and forth over this. Ultimately, it's really important that not become the focus here, because that's Joel Barry was not going after your Catholic doctrine. That's not why he made these posts, guys. It wasn't about an evangelical, telling Catholics that thare not real Christians. I have Catholics tell me that I'm, as a Southern Baptist, I'm not a real Christian all the time. Happens on Twitter, whatever. My life will go on. Me and Jesus are just fine. However, that is not the reason that Joel Barry was saying this. It had nothing to do with whether Catholics are real Christians. I know he has like this whole side quest about, Catholics in general when it comes to World War II, because everything's World War II. But ultimately, this is about Joel Barry and many others, unfortunately, looking and saying, whatever Israel does is fine. And I don't care if it hurts Christians. I don't care. Yeah, if they're Catholic, then maybe they're not even real Christian. Whatever justification I need, there's a blank check for the way that Israel. And again, remember, Israel had already admitted fault, had already apologized. So he is more radical on this than the Israeli government even was. And so the fact that he was willing to just go hard in the paint on this really sent a lot of Catholics saying, oh, well, this is evangelicals. This is all evangelicals. Now, guys, I know there are a lot of dispensationalist evangelicals. I'm aware of this, but remember, many of us are also not. And please understand, at the heart of this, this is not a division between Catholics and Baptists or Catholics and evangelicals. That's not what the issue is here. Okay. Like we can hash that out, but please don't lose the forest for the trees here. All evangelicals do not hate you because Joel Berry said something insane. Joel Berry is not the Pope of evangelicals. We don't have one of those. He's not speaking from the seat of the Holy See. Like he's some guy running a comedy website who regularly says absolutely unhinged things in support of Israel, and this is just the next unhinged thing. I said this early on about Joel, and he like lost his mind about it because like, oh, how could this possibly? And the evidence is just here, like it's just there, black and white. Like this is who he is, this is how he conducts himself, and he's got all the worst people in the world. There's not very many people defending him at this point, but it's guys like James Lindsay. Obviously he's got to lash himself to this whole thing, and so you got to see these people as guys in a bunker just screaming absolutely insane stuff because they know they're losing, as opposed to like actually taking this seriously and putting a dividing line between evangelicals and Catholics at this point. Christians do not need to be divided over the death of Christians. Okay. I am incredibly sad that these 3 Catholics have died, and I can be just as sad at that as a Southern Baptist. Like we don't need these artificial divisions about this.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is a forest for the trees moment with a lot of this sort of fighting. Like, if you want to have people like Joel make this an issue about the Israeli state, or you want to use this to relitigate and reaffirm your doctrinal beliefs about the Second World War and the post-war consensus, fine, so be it. But like, that's not the issue that really matters to me right now. The issue that matters to me is that on the world stage, the United States has been at the forefront of supporting policies that inadvertently hurt the center of the faith and the people that tend to profess it the most inside the United States. And whether Tucker's position about we always end up with more dead Christians everywhere we go. I mean, so far that seems to be true, at least within my lifetime.
Yeah.
So like, that's concerning. But at the same time, it does really illustrate that there has been sort of this shift since October 7th on the question of the relationship between Israel and the United States. Will that lead to any significant change? I do not know, remains to be seen. I think a lot of the things that other right-wing writers had thought about in the past, whether it be Robert Whitaker or Sam Francis on these relationships, is like a lot of the positions that have been taken on. And we talked about this, years ago, it feels like 2 years ago, with the Claudine Gay stuff, where a lot of the anti-Israel or the anti-Zionist protests came out there were, railing against settler colonialism. And now you're sort of seeing this like emergence of this like anti-woke neoconservatism. We're like, well, we're against all these things, but we have special exceptions for obvious reasons. And it's like, well, that's fine to have exceptions because everyone is going to be a supporter of the thing that they identify with. That's just sort of the logical conclusion of Robert Conquest's like first rule. Everyone's conservative about the thing they know the most about, and that means our identities. But at the end of the day, this is going to just boil down to the fact that you have awful actors out there online that are willing to stir the pot and, start crap over churches and theology and doctrinal issues for all sides. It does not matter your church or denomination on this issue. They're trying to drag you in, and instead we're looking at the fact that, historically speaking, the United States has been at the forefront of supporting a country that has been antagonistic for thousands of years against your religion. And, there's very difficult things in there. And at the same time, we're diehard supporters of what Israel does in terms of its border control policy and things like that, about preserving its intent, while we can't even have the same thing for ourselves. I would love to have the same border control policy that Israel does for the United States.
Absolutely.
That would be amazing. But at the same time, we can't even have that conversation because we often get lost, like you said, forest for the trees, when actors go out there to deliberately stir the pot.
Yeah, I would like to see the United States stop involving itself in military operations that end up with dead Christians. I think that's a perfectly reasonable goal. And I would hope that other people who have espoused their idea of American identity being singularly placed on Christian faith, I would hope those same people would value the lives of Christians elsewhere. I understand, we're not going to be able to save every Christian. There is a proximity thing where obviously we have to care for the Christians in our nation first, and we cannot run around and fighting a war on behalf of every single Christian across the world. But at the very least, we cannot involve ourselves in conflicts that are obviously repeatedly ending in Christian minorities being killed in other countries. And I want to make this clear because it should need to be said, but I'll say it just in case, because I know people will take it out of context, or somewhere James Lindsay is doing his Media Matters thing, trying to clip what we're saying here, because he does it all the time. It's actually all he does with his time these days. However, this does not mean that Islam is your friend. It's not. Islam is anti-Christian. It's anti-Western. It does not belong in the West. It should hold no sway here. It does not mean that Hamas is good. They are not, obviously. Like, there are plenty of Muslim terror groups out there, and they are evil and they hate you. So the whole, people running around being like, yeah, well, it'll be Christian and Islam. No, there's no alliance here. These people hate you too. So just please remember that when we're talking about these things, this is in no way an endorsement of Islam or Hamas or a defense of any of those forces. But every Catholic in Gaza is not some random member of Hamas who then can be fired on by a tank. That assertion is absolutely, it's evil. It's evil, and saying it and doubling down on it and not apologizing. It's horrible. It's a horrible way to conduct yourself, especially towards people you pretend are your Christian brothers and sisters. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one. Or sorry, we got some questions from the people here real quick. So before we go to the questions there, Mr. Prudentialist, where can people find your excellent work?
Sure, you can find me on Twitter at Mr. Prudentialist or theprudentialist.substack.com. I'm going to have an article out this week sort of looking at how Twitter affects our ability to engage with the news. I am usually live on Thursdays with a show called Live from the Pond, where I also cover current events and things like that. And for those interested in sort of the books or the literature that inform my worldview, or also just sort of influential in sort of the political right, I have a show called Do You Even Read with a friend of mine from the Blood Satellite podcast. I think he'd be a great guest for you, Auron. We're going to cover a recent book that came out called Anti-Memetics, Why Some Ideas Resist Spreading. And it's going to sort of look at our information ecosystem on how certain memes and ideas work, like why Auron sign tapping on Twitter works compared to some form of posting online. So if you're interested in that, we'll be live next Monday in the evening. But as always, Auron, thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to have you on. And Cool Dude agrees. He says, Prude is always a great guest. Another cool dude, you might even say, thank you, Auron. Yes, always fantastic to have our favorite frog here with us doing the commentary. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. If it's your first time on this channel, please make sure that you subscribe on YouTube, click the bell notification, all that stuff, so you know when we go live. Don't forget that if you want to get these broadcasts as podcasts, you need to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. And when you do leave that rating or review, it helps with the algorithm magic. If you want to subscribe to Blaze TV so you can watch these uninterrupted, no commercials, you don't have to worry about any of that, you can go and use the promo code Auron to get that $20 off. And as always, thank you for watching, guys. I will talk to you next time.